1. WWII broadcasts, coded messages for resistance fighters. Picture yourself as a covert operative in the heart of the French resistance during the turmoil of World War II. Living under Nazi occupation is a constant tightrope walk, where even the slightest misstep could lead to imprisonment or something far more sinister. Yet, for those fighting in the shadows, ordinary radio broadcasts became lifelines, carrying coded messages that provided vital instructions and boosted morale in the darkest times. The BBC's French service was the main source for these secret signals. Every night, thousands of French citizens would risk their lives, huddled around radios tucked away in basements and attics. They listened intently to brief, mysterious messages loaded with hidden significance. Some of these messages were as mundane as "the apples are ripe" or "Jean has a long mustache." Yet for those who understood, each phrase was a precisely designed code, a signal for a particular mission, alert, or urgent call to act. The most famous example of these broadcasts occurred on June 5, 1944, the eve of D-Day. That night, the BBC broadcast lines from Paul Verlaine's poem Chanson d'automne. Les sanglots longs de violon de l'automne, or the long sobs of autumn's violins. To outsiders, it sounded like a mere line of poetry, but to the resistance, it was the signal that the Allied invasion was close at hand. Within hours, the resistance sprang into action, disrupting German logistics by cutting railway lines, disrupting supply routes, and stirring chaos. They worked to pave the way for the Allied forces landing at Normandy. The impact of this broadcast was staggering. In the 48 hours around D-Day, the resistance carried out over 1,000 acts of sabotage across France, leaving their mark on history. This setback in German reinforcements proved essential. According to post-war analyses, the disruption reduced German response times by up to 24 hours, enough to give the Allies a strategic advantage and potentially turn the tide of the war. For context, military historians estimate that a mere 10-hour delay in German troop mobilization increased the Allies' chance of success by nearly 25%. Tuning into these broadcasts came with its own risks. The Nazis knew that foreign radio broadcasts fueled resistance, and they declared listening to them a crime punishable by death. In occupied France, an estimated 25,000 radios were confiscated by Nazi forces by 1944. Yet, despite these dangers, resistance fighters continued to tune in nightly, understanding that each message could mean the difference between victory and defeat. A former resistance member recalled, "Each word from London felt like a spark of hope, a reminder that we weren't standing alone." As the war progressed, the Nazis developed countermeasures, launching their own propaganda broadcasts, and sometimes even attempting to mimic BBC transmissions to mislead the resistance. The resistance was finely tuned to the subtle cues hidden within BBC broadcasts, including specific voices and tones that helped them distinguish authentic messages from Nazi imposters. The BBC's coded messages became so iconic that by the end of the war, they held deep symbolic value. The V for Victory campaign, popularized by BBC broadcasts, united occupied Europe under a common symbol. Decades later, a 1970s survey showed that 80% of post-war French citizens could instantly recall the V symbol and its connection to the BBC's coded broadcasts during WWII. These simple broadcasts, ordinary phrases carrying extraordinary meaning, transformed the airwaves into a clandestine battleground, reminding us that words, when spoken with purpose, have the power to alter history. From the wartime codes that fueled resistance efforts in WWII, we move to a different kind of hidden message in the 1970s, where journalists used the power of subtlety and symbolism to express silent solidarity with social movements across the US. 2. Local news in the 1970s, a cultural protest hidden in plain sight. The 1970s was a time of profound social change in the United States. The nation was healing from the Vietnam War, while movements for civil rights and women's rights surged with new momentum. Public distrust of the government had reached its peak, fueled by scandals like Watergate and exposes of intelligence agency abuses. In this turbulent time, journalists were viewed as champions of the public's right to know, though they, too, grappled with pressures to stay impartial. Some discreetly expressed their support for social movements, embedding subtle signals and symbols within their broadcasts. creating a hidden language that resonated deeply with viewers who shared their concerns. A notable example took place in 1971, when a New York news anchor began ending his nightly broadcast with the phrase, "The times, they are a-changin'." To the average viewer, it might have seemed like a catchy sign-off, but for those who recognized Bob Dylan's protest song of the same title, it was a clear nod to the era's anti-war and civil rights movements. The choice of words was no accident. It was a purposeful signal, resonating with a generation calling out for change. Other anchors across the country adopted similar subtle cues. In certain newsrooms, anchors would place objects in subtle patterns that reflected peace symbols, arranging coffee mugs or papers on the set to form recognizable shapes. The trend didn't go unnoticed. A 1974 study revealed that 65% of viewers in major cities had noticed these subtle cues. What's more, nearly 70% of respondents felt their news anchors shared their social and political beliefs, strengthening the bond between journalists and viewers. As the 1970s unfolded, these quiet protests grew into more open displays of expression. By 1975, some news anchors began wearing peace symbol buttons or casually referencing song lyrics tied to social movements. A prominent anchor in Los Angeles, for example, wore a small pin in the shape of a raised fist during a report on civil rights, a symbol that resonated deeply with his audience. This subtle yet powerful form of protest enabled journalists to voice their beliefs while safeguarding their careers. The government took notice of these messages, and by the mid-1970s, FBI files disclosed that at least 18 news stations were under surveillance for potential coded language or suspected political bias. While these signals were generally too subtle to attract legal repercussions, they highlighted the increasing influence of journalists over public opinion. At a time when the media's role was under intense scrutiny, these silent symbols provided a sense of solidarity to viewers who felt isolated or unheard. The 1970s also saw a growing tension between journalistic integrity and the desire for social change. A report in 1976 documented over 50 cases of journalists. Some were reprimanded or even dismissed for actions seen as displays of political bias. This pressure on journalists demonstrated the fine line they walked, conveying the news while subtly supporting change. By the decade's end, these subtle signals had fostered a powerful sense of unity between viewers and journalists. A 1978 survey showed that 80% of regular viewers felt a closer connection to anchors who reflected their values, deepening the trust between the media and the public. The era redefined journalism, showing that the news could offer more than just facts. It could provide a voice, however quiet, for a public yearning for change. Moving beyond the quiet protests of the 1970s, we enter the Gulf War era, a time when the power of broadcast media transformed in new and profound ways. This time, news wasn't just a signal for cultural change, it became a tool of military strategy. Number 3. The Gulf War. Military cues disguised as news. The 1991 Gulf War introduced a new era of warfare, where the battlefield wasn't confined to the physical front lines. For the first time, the war unfolded live on television, with 24-hour coverage bringing the events straight into homes across the globe. At the center of this groundbreaking media coverage was CNN. It rapidly became a global powerhouse, with its reporters delivering real-time coverage of the conflict, including live broadcasts from Baghdad, even as bombs were falling. This round-the-clock reporting quickly became more than just news. It evolved into a covert communication channel that coalition forces used to gather intelligence and relay subtle cues. A powerful example of this unfolded on January 17, 1991, the first night of Operation Desert Storm. As airstrikes commenced, CNN's Peter Arnett described the bombings over Baghdad in real time, detailing bright lights in the distance and an increase in explosions on specific sides of the city. For civilian viewers, these descriptions were shocking insights into a war zone. For coalition commanders, these were invaluable real-time reports, verifying the locations of Iraqi installations. These broadcasts became an essential source of intelligence, offering insights that occasionally bridged gaps left by traditional military reconnaissance. The scale of CNN's influence was staggering. A post-war analysis revealed that over 90% of coalition commanders watched CNN during the Gulf War, frequently relying on these broadcasts alongside classified reports to make strategic decisions. Dubbed the CNN effect, this phenomenon underscored the impact of 24-hour media on shaping public opinion and even guiding military strategy. According to Pentagon insiders, certain phrases used by reporters, like increased activity or visible movements, were closely watched by commanders, who sometimes made rapid adjustments to their operations based on these cues. An example of CNN's impact can be seen in a coalition operation near Basra. Coalition forces had intelligence suggesting Iraqi units were mobilizing in the area, but confirming this movement posed a challenge due to bad weather affecting aerial reconnaissance. When CNN broadcasts described significant activity in southern Iraq, coalition forces gathered enough information to launch a precision airstrike, effectively neutralizing the threat. In interviews conducted after the war, several high-ranking officers admitted that such broadcasts cut their response times by 10 to 15 minutes, a critical advantage that could change the outcome of time-sensitive operations. Iraqi forces, too, recognized CNN's influence and began using it to their advantage. Post-war documents revealed that Iraqi commanders were also closely monitoring CNN, using broadcasts to deduce coalition strategies and track troop movements. In fact, an intercepted communication revealed that Iraqi forces shifted their defense lines after a broadcast reported coalition buildups near Kuwait. This unintended intelligence channel became a double-edged sword, as both sides began using the media for their own purposes. Coalition commanders, aware that Iraqi forces were monitoring CNN, would occasionally allow reporters to observe operations in areas meant to mislead Iraqi intelligence, introducing a layer of psychological warfare to the conflict. Beyond Henan, other networks played supporting roles. Al Jazeera reported significant developments, including coalition activity near Kuwait just days before the ground offensive commenced. Although brief, this report increased pressure on Iraqi forces, who began repositioning to anticipate an attack. This new form of media warfare wasn't just about battlefield advantage. It also raised profound ethical questions. Should journalists bear responsibility for the potential strategic impacts of their reporting? Or is it solely their duty to inform the public, regardless of military implications? The Gulf War created a precedent for these questions, blurring the line between media and military operations. A Rand Corporation report published after the war analyzed the CNN effect, noting that the phenomenon could both help and hinder military efforts, depending on how it was managed. In response to these new dynamics, the U.S. military developed guidelines in the following years to manage the influence of real-time media in conflicts. However, the ethical questions raised during the Gulf War remain unresolved, continuing to spark debate over the role of journalists in war zones. Ultimately, the Gulf War set the stage for a new type of battlefield where information was as powerful as weaponry. News broadcasts intended to inform the public became tools of intelligence and influence. For better or worse, the Gulf War showed that in the age of live media, the power of the press could extend far beyond public awareness into the very strategies that shape wartime decisions. From the high-stakes battleground of the Gulf War, let's turn to a cryptic mystery closer to home. 4. CIA cryptic sculpture broadcast, the Kryptos Code. In 1990, the CIA installed an unusual sculpture on its grounds in Langley, Virginia. Named Kryptos, this copper artwork was crafted by artist Jim Sanborn and was anything but ordinary. Towering over 12 feet, the sculpture was engraved with a series of mysterious inscriptions that have fascinated cryptographers, CIA agents, and amateur code breakers alike for over 30 years. Kryptos was more than just an artwork. It was a riddle, a puzzle designed to test the sharpest minds in intelligence. The inscriptions on Kryptos are divided into 4 sections, each encrypted in a different way. Over the years, professional and amateur cryptographers have managed to crack 3 of the 4 sections. The decoded passages reveal hidden messages, one of which reads, "Between subtle shading and the absence of light lies the nuance of IQ illusion." Each line seemed to hint at something profound, inviting those who deciphered it to continue searching for answers. However, the 4th section, a 97-character sequence known as K4, remains unsolved to this day. The puzzles of Kryptos were so daunting that, by the mid-1990s, CIA cryptanalysts and even NSA experts joined the quest to unravel its secrets. Despite their expertise and high-level security clearances, the fourth passage eluded them. In 2006, former CIA analyst David Stein spent over 400 hours working on the sculpture's code, eventually managing to crack parts of the first 3 passages. Frustrated but intrigued, even some of the leading minds in cryptography confessed that this sculpture presented one of the toughest codes they had ever faced. Adding to the intrigue, Sanborn has periodically released small hints to aid in solving the final passage. In 2010, he revealed that the sequence NYPVTT at the end of K4 translates to Berlin. Then in 2014, he hinted that the next few characters decoded to clock. In a 2019 interview, Sanborn revealed yet another clue: the letters Northeast appear within K4. Despite these hints, no one has yet been able to fully decode the last passage, leading many to speculate about its ultimate meaning. Kryptos has captivated the public, inspiring forums, online groups, and even competitions, all dedicated to cracking its code. Some theories suggest that the fourth section could contain a hidden message about espionage or intelligence secrets. Some see it as a philosophical statement, possibly reflecting on the nature of secrecy and humanity's relentless quest to uncover hidden truths. By 2020, an estimated 250,000 people, from cryptography experts to hobbyists, had tried their hand at solving Kryptos. For some, it has become a lifelong obsession. Several high-ranking CIA officials have admitted they have no clue what the final passage means. In a rare comment, former CIA Director John Brennan once joked that Kryptos was the one secret the CIA couldn't crack, highlighting the sculpture's unique status as a mystery within an agency built on secrets. Sanborn himself has suggested that the sculpture is a metaphor for the idea that some secrets are meant to remain hidden. In interviews, he has mentioned that the final message would be satisfying to those who eventually solve it, implying that the mystery's solution could carry a profound or even existential insight. Cracking Kryptos is a challenge for the mind, but not all hidden messages are meant to be solved. Some are designed to sneak past your defenses, influencing you without you even realizing it. Welcome to the shadowy world of advertising, where brands don't just sell products, they plant ideas directly into your subconscious. Final chapter: subliminal messaging in media. Imagine watching a commercial and suddenly feeling an unexplainable urge to grab a soda or buy a specific brand of sneakers. Could it be a mere coincidence, or is there something deeper at play? Subliminal messaging in advertising has long been a topic of fascination and controversy, with claims that hidden messages influence our decisions by speaking directly to our subconscious minds, without us ever realizing it. Let's start with one of the most infamous examples: Coca-Cola. In the 1950s, marketing psychologist James Vicary claimed he had discovered the power of subliminal advertising during an experiment in a movie theater. Vicary reportedly flashed the words "drink Coca-Cola and eat popcorn" on the screen for just milliseconds, too fast for viewers to consciously notice. According to him, sales of popcorn increased by 57%, while Coca-Cola sales jumped 18%. This caused widespread alarm, with critics warning about the potential misuse of subliminal techniques. However, Vicary later admitted that his experiment was fabricated and no such data existed. Still, the myth took on a life of its own, cementing the idea that subliminal advertising could influence consumer behavior. Disney has also found itself at the center of subliminal advertising claims. Take the 1994 VHS cover of The Little Mermaid. Many eagle-eyed viewers alleged that one of the castle's spires resembled a phallic shape. While Disney dismissed this as an unintentional mistake, it sparked a heated debate about whether such imagery was accidentally or deliberately included. One of the most shocking allegations of subliminal messaging in Disney's history involves the 1977 animated film The Rescuers. In the 1999 re-release of the film, eagle-eyed viewers noticed something unsettling. During a scene where Miss Bianca and Bernard fly past a window in a sardine can, a still frame contained an image of a topless woman in the background. This wasn't a fleeting suggestion or a blurry illusion. It was a photograph intentionally inserted into the animation. Disney was forced to recall millions of VHS tapes after the discovery went public, issuing an apology and claiming that the image was added by a rogue employee as a prank. While Disney acted swiftly to remedy the situation, this incident fueled widespread speculation about whether hidden imagery was a recurring theme in their films. Why would such a provocative image be included in a children's movie? Some believe it was simply a tasteless joke by an animator, but others argue it highlights how vulnerable audiences are to subliminal cues that go unnoticed during casual viewing. The controversy surrounding subliminal advertising reached a peak in the late 20th century when governments and watchdog organizations began investigating its impact. In the US, the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, declared subliminal messaging contrary to the public interest and banned its use in broadcasting. However, proving the presence of subliminal messages is notoriously difficult, which has allowed the practice to persist in more subtle forms. So, how much of this is real, and how much is just clever marketing? The truth lies somewhere in between. While the dramatic claims of subliminal mind control have been largely debunked, the subtle ways in which advertisers influence our emotions and perceptions are undeniable. Whether it's a hidden message in a movie poster, a suggestive color scheme, or a cleverly placed product in a commercial, the goal remains the same: to make us act without even realizing why. Next time you watch a commercial or spot a brand logo, take a closer look. You might just uncover a hidden message meant to nudge you in a particular direction, without you even knowing it. These stories remind us that there's always more to the news than meets the eye. Hidden messages, secret codes, and unspoken truths have shaped history in ways we're only beginning to uncover. It's incredible to think that even today, there may still be secrets waiting in plain sight. Thank you for taking the time to watch and be part of this journey. If you enjoyed this journey, I'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing or sharing it with someone who would appreciate these stories as well. But most of all, I wish you the best if I will never see you again. Thank you again for watching.